All right, we are now live for the Zoom webinar. Give us a few moments. Let's get all the attendees in. Welcome to the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce Zoom webinar series. We've been doing this since COVID-19 started to make sure our business get the latest information from our experts. And today we're going to be talking about how to leverage COVID-19 for business growth. So give us a few moments and let's working out some technical difficulties and we're going to be good to go. All right, so it looks like the live stream isn't really working right now.
Really?
Yeah, for Facebook.
We actually have, it's growing as far as people joining.
Yes, online. Give us a moment for all those watching. Let's try and figure this out. We want to make sure that we've had this conversation on Facebook so more people can join us. So right now we're just trying to figure this out with Facebook. So give us a moment. All right, I think that we have it all together now, and we got this rolling. So I want to welcome everyone to the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce online Zoom series on how to leverage and do business in this COVID-19. Thank you very much. We've been doing quite a few of these seminars over the past few weeks, and I would like to turn it over to our president of the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Eric Knowles, to introduce the topic of today and also our speaker.
Good morning, and thank you, Matthew. As Matthew said, for the last couple of weeks, we have been engaging the chamber membership and the community at large to bring you information to help guide you through doing what you need to do to protect yourself from a business perspective, whether you were applying for the EIDL or the PPP or the state emergency loan. So today we have Mr. David Wilson, and I'm gonna let David introduce himself and tell everybody what he does. He's been doing what he is being a financial advisor, and it goes much deeper than that for several years. And With that being said, David, say hello to the folks that have joined us, and then we'll get deep into the conversation.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be working with the Chamber of Commerce. I think the Chamber of Commerce for folk of color is a very significant institution for our community. So I've been in the investment business and real estate business for the last 30 years. So I guess that is a few years, huh, Eric?
Yeah, that's a few years. I was going to let you tell them.
And but it's a good thing, because being in the industry for a long time, you've seen a lot of cycles, and you've seen a lot of trends, and you have different perspectives. So as I was sharing with Eric, what I wanted to share what the private sector is doing, what we're doing in terms of growing businesses, even in these difficult times, because someone's making money. And if you got a strategy and plan, you can make money. You should not be sitting on the sideline at this particular point in time. I'm going to cover a couple of areas. I'm going to give a perspective of what's happening globally, what's happening on a federal level, and what's happening on a local level, and then we'll dig in. But this pandemic has affected the whole world, and you have central banks around the whole world trying to figure out, okay, how do we keep our economy from slipping into a depression? Right now, globally, we're looking at an unemployment rate that is akin to the 1929 unemployment rate. And so people are very, very concerned. Federal governments are doing everything, trying to shore up their economy, pumping money into their economies to keep it going. Sort of unfortunately, there were already a number of major countries around the world that we do business with that were already struggling. Spain, parts of Europe, certainly the Middle East had their challenges. China economy is slowing to a drip, so that the theory is that this is not going to be a fast turnaround, but it doesn't mean that people shouldn't be taking advantage of opportunities. Eric, one of the things that, as we talked about, I want to share is what the federal government is doing. The federal government is doing some things that are really sort of unprecedented, that they had never done before. And one of those things is that they're buying commercial and corporate debt. So the U.S. Treasury is stepping in now and saying that if you are a big company and you got corporate debt and you feel that you're impacted by this economy, we'll buy that debt, which means that that person or that big company is no longer liable for that debt to the bank. They're now liable to the federal government, which is going to give them a lot more leeway. Now, when you look at that, there's a lot of things can happen around that probably was not intended. And I'm going to share an anecdote a little later about the Fontainebleau Hilton Hotel, which most of us who live in South Florida, are familiar with. And the philosophy for why the federal government is buying this debt is that if they buy the debt from the bank now should have more money to lend, so it keeps the market liquid. Prior to, if you all follow some of the economics, is that they have lowered interest rates, and interest rates are so low that they can't lower interest rate any lower that would have any impact on the turning around of the economy or providing any liquidity. So their philosophy is buying debt. And because they had never bought corporate debt before, that's very, very unique. But it's not so uncommon to what happened under the last presidential administration when they put equity into the auto industry. Now, on the other side, the personal side, which may impact more of us listening, is the personal residential side. Additionally, what the federal government is doing, and this is through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they're buying mortgages so that if someone's mortgage become delinquent, the federal government, these agencies will step in and buy that mortgage from the lender. And that's interesting because bills on the corporate side as well as on the personal side, that's a subjective kind of thing. So if you were behind on your mortgage for 1 month, they'll buy that debt, which gives you, in some instances, a lot of leeway, because now they got programs where you can defer your mortgage payments for up to 12 months. And if anybody's smart, you recognize I'd rather have the money in my hands than in someone else's hands. And sometimes these are what some people who are complaining about the big banks, the big companies getting all the money. is sometimes is what we call the unintended consequences. Because there's been a lot of talk about why are the big companies getting loans and smaller companies are not getting loans. And the reason is that with big companies, and if you got a loan with a bank, let's say it's a $10 million loan, they already got all your financial information. You know, you're required to update your financial statements, submit tax returns on an annual basis. So it just makes it very easy for them to lend money to people who already got a relationship with, which has been a big pushback, you know, because this is not the intent. But, you know, that's what's going on. And for better or worse, people are going to take advantage of it because they're following the law. We have seen where some big corporations decided they're going to give the money back that they've gotten. There was a story of one company with $1.4 billion in revenue. They applied for 50 loans and were approved for 10, including loans and grants. Whereas the small businesses are still being impacted and are not getting those grants because they didn't have the relationships with the banks. And the banks, it makes it easier. You know, what we're seeing with the banks, you got a small regional bank, community bank, and even a credit union that, you know, they want to do these loans, but they're used to getting, say, maybe 10 loan requests every couple of months. Now they're getting 50 loan requests per month. And they don't have the infrastructure to handle that volume of activity. Because these typical loan departments with these small banks, they may have 5 or 6 employees. And also they are struggling with the technology back end to handle that volume of activity. When you consider they may have a department of 7 people and you got to look at 50 applications, and without the enterprise and platform technology, if someone emails an application to a loan officer and you also got a processor and you also got an underwriter, that document is not very dynamic because it's only in the email box of the loan officer, and trying to share that across a platform makes it very, very complicated in terms of trying to get these loans done. So that if you're going to apply for loans and grants, you really need to have all your documentation in place and make it user-friendly.
David,
So Dave,
oh, go
Yes.
ahead, Eric.
yeah, if I may, you're talking about having documents in place, and here we are this week. The Senate passed the new bill, and it basically, I believe, passed through the House and waiting for the president's signature. So,
Yeah.
from a local perspective, what does that mean?
Well, let me tell you, that's the best thing that could happen, because the first one that passed a couple of weeks ago, it focused on companies that had employees, and it was a much bigger footprint. This one is more geared to what we call the gig economy, where people who are gigging, you know, you get 1099 incomes. For instance, I own a real estate company. Well, I got, 11 agents that are 1099 that under the old loan, the first CARES Act, they could not benefit. But now that this new is coming out, they can benefit because they're 1099 employees. So I think that's going to mean a lot. But again, making sure that you got all your documents in place, because it's got to be documented. And there's going to be some fraud and a lot of things that people are not going to be happy about, because these lenders are going to also have to do reporting after these things have been done. And so that's going to be a situation where you want to be very cautious of who you're going to make the requests from. And
well, back to the point that you were making in terms of credit unions and small banks and not having the manpower, but that is, from what I understand, what our elected officials, the federal government, has put in place, is that they're opening it up for these smaller entities. Really, our folks, our mom and pops, they don't necessarily have relationships with the larger entities. So I hear what you're saying in terms of their capacity to respond, but at the same time, the feds have said, "Hey, we're opening this up to these."
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because what they've done, the first CARES Act, it had to be banks with SBA loan lending approvals. Now they've opened it up to any particular lender that can do it, because I don't know the exact number, but let's say someone gets a $100,000 loan, they're going to pay the bank something like 5% of that just to package the paper up, and then the bank will give you the money, then the government will reimburse the bank the money that they put out there plus a 6% fee on it. So the banks are good. I mean, they can make a lot of money, and it's a good thing. But when I talk about them not being prepared, I'm being realistic about knowing what enterprise software and back office software that any company need, and we'll talk a little bit about that further on, that you need to be able to run your business efficiently. The banks might have a glossy window sitting out there when you walk up, but that back end operation, a lot of companies, that's why we're behind this thing in America, but a lot of companies had not converted to what we call fintech companies, where all those documents for the smaller lenders, you just upload those documents into a portal. They're still where you're emailing those documents, and to some degree, with credit unions or whatever, where you have to go have FaceTime, and nobody's in the office, so there's not going to be any FaceTime, and like you said, for the small businesses, like what a member of the chamber, they're the ones that are going to be impacted. So you need to know that, so that one of the things that you got to be very clear on, if you got to go to your storage and get the last 2-year tax return, scan them in and put them in folders on your system, so that, because you can be applying for 3 or 4 different loans, grants, and et cetera, because you can apply from state, local, federal, and et cetera, et cetera. Now that's an inordinate amount of paper that you got to manage, and you need to have in one place, because unfortunately, they may not all be asking for the same documents. You got to have all your bank statements that you can upload, your financial statements that you can upload, in addition to your tax returns and whatever necessary documents. And what I'm hearing is that, people are getting frustrated because they still have to provide this information, and they just don't have it readily. And with all of the other issues that they're dealing with, and you need to have it in one place, because unfortunately, they may not all be asking for the same documents. You gotta have.
We're losing you, David.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, good. So yeah, that's, that, and what it's telling us as a nation, but it should be telling you as a business, is that you have to step up your operations and your process in terms of how you run your business. All of my companies, I call them fintech companies, no matter what companies they are, because the fintech is just a merging of finance and technology. But if you are in the restaurant business, you're a restaurant technology business. You need to, even if you're not open right now, you need to let the world know that you're still in business, and using platforms, social media, et cetera, communicating and saying, hey, this is what we're doing, or this is what we're going through. You got to still be doing that. If you're in the real estate business, you got to still be sending out emails and et cetera. The challenge is that if you had not started to convert your software and your back end operations of how you track all your financial statements, bank accounts, checking accounts, how you deal with your customers and interact with your customers, and you got client relationship management software in place. Well, if you haven't been doing that, you need to do that. And you got everything out there from Zoho to Salesforce, et cetera, that allow you to do that, so that people know you're in business. I got a call with a group that was looking for financing for a large church. And for the first time on the application, they asked, what is your social media footprint? Typically, it was all financial information that they wanted to know, attendance information. So that just shows you where the world is migrating to.
So I know Matthew wanted to jump in and ask you something. Go ahead, Matt.
Now I was, it was very insightful when you talked about the situation and why the federal government is stepping in, and how that is benefiting businesses and also even homeowners. A lot of people have been thinking about the fact that the federal government is only doing this just because they want to help out large corporations. So it's very interesting for you to say that the federal government, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said the federal government is buying debt from banks so they
Yep.
can free up their resources to lend to more businesses.
Exactly. Yep.
And then they're doing the same with mortgages to where they're buying up mortgages so that homeowners can take advantage of the 12 months under Freddie Mac. I think, the Freddie Mac loan mortgages deferment on
Yep.
that part.
Yeah, and I think if your business is impacted, you should do that. I mean, first of all, it's like a gift, and if someone's sending you that, you should take advantage of it because this is going to take a while. So let's say you're a small business owner or whatever, and you've been impacted. If you've been impacted 10%, take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. We were on a call. We've been doing a call every day with the membership at 4:00. And actually, a couple of our members, one had said that, well, she wasn't going to take advantage because she really didn't need to. But then, things may change in a couple months. And one other person also, he said, well, I'm not doing it. I said, well, the fact his particular business is a janitorial business and he's servicing offices and buildings. And so the fact that the need for his type of business is going to grow. So I said to him, why not apply for this money? Because you may have to hire new people.
Let me tell you, it would be, everybody should, I'm taking advantage of everyone that's available to me, and even in business, I'm always borrowing money. I call up all my creditors. I mean, that's what you do in these times, they don't have to call me, I'll call them. And if they got some leeway, because my business has been impacted. I mean, we're a technology focused company, so we're not as impacted and we're probably busier now than we are before. But when I look at 3 areas where my business has been impacted in, for instance, one of my things, I don't get to travel, and when I travel, that's how I open up opportunities on a national level, based on asset under management through my investment firm. We've had we had a 25%, well, it was like a 30% drop in the market. I'd like to think that I'm smarter than that. My client's market probably dropped 20%, while the rest of the market dropped 30%. But I've been through this about 7 cycles over the last 30 years. But at the end of the day, because the asset under management dropped, my income dropped because I get compensated based on the number of assets under management, So
as you said, David, you're talking about how your business has been impacted. So how do you maintain, but before I go there, one thing that we, I guess, tend to forget that the money that the federal government is putting out is basically our money. It's the taxes that we've been paying.
Absolutely.
That businesses have been paying. It's the taxes that we as individuals pay at the end of the year. So,
and everybody who can, and I'll give that anecdote in a second on Fontainebleau Hilton, right? But my business has been impacted also based on when we have certain transactions that have to go through the judicial system. Well, the judicial system was shut down for a minute, and so it's slowing things down. I have to get an audit done for my company every year, and they were not at full staff because they were practicing social distancing. So they're not having everybody in the office now, right? So therefore, based on the audit that I had to do, that audit is due by the end of the second month every year. Elsewise, they fine you $100 a day. And so, how do you deal with that? Fortunately, they gave us extensions on that. But again, more anxiety, more stress that you have to deal with.
Right. So how do you maintain some semblance of normalcy? What are you doing? What are you recommending to your clients?
Yeah. Well, now to me, it's a story about 2 guys cutting down an axe, and there was an older guy and a younger guy, and they're going to see who's going to cut down their tree that they were competing against each other the fastest. And the older guy would take a break at the middle of the morning. He'd take a lunch break and an afternoon break. And the younger guy, he just kept cutting. And at the end of the day, the older guy tree fell before the younger guy. And the younger guy said, hey, well, how did you beat me when you kept taking breaks? And he said, every time I stopped to take a break, I sharpened my axe. And this is a time for people to sharpen their axe, you know? So a lot of what I'm spending, you know, I spend time looking at various different enterprise software that I can use within my business to be able to help me more efficient, because a lot of times, you know, we can't find the time to seem to have the time, but now is a good time to work, you know, to get smarter at, you know, what it is that you do. Eric, I haven't gotten to your yoga, but I've been doing a lot of stretching, you know, giving more, you know,
Yeah.
and, you know, listening to a lot of music to deal with some of the normalities to keep it normal. But, you know, what I see is a tremendous amount of opportunities. And, you know, we're implementing several things, just going back to what we were talking about with respect to, you know, having all your documentation and all your financials in one place, so that, because this thing's going to happen again. It may not be this thing, but it's going to be something else. And you don't want to put yourself in a position where these things happens and you're scrambling, you know. So I think for small businesses, I would be spending a tremendous amount of time looking at softwares that run my business, so that, because I can run my companies from my cell phone, because all documents, everything is stored there, everything is secure in the cloud. And we converted several years ago because we were hacked, you know? And so, you know,
And that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we have in our community as small businesses is, you know, we're good at what we do. We may be
exactly.
we may be great cooks, maybe be great doctors, but we don't have the back of the house in order. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, the beauty of it now is that the internet has brought what I call democracy to the markets, and it's even the playing field, you know. And so you have to look at those things. So there are two suites of software. One is called business intelligence, and the other is called enterprise software. So any of these types of platforms where it's like when you email me an email, Eric, your email is attached to your contact in my phone and in my computer system. So I never have to go through looking through an email box to find it. You know, that's just
Again, business intelligence, and what was the other?
Business enterprise software.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe, you know, when things get to norm, we can do a session on those software. But I've been using these types of software since the early 90s, and I've watched them evolve so that, you know, they're completely interactive with my database and my contact. So like if I go to a chamber function or someone, like if you own a restaurant, everybody who comes into your restaurant, you should try to grab their email. Now, if you got their email, it allows you to communicate with them, so that then
Right.
so if just because you got their email, what else do you want, right? So that if that person that came into the restaurant was an attorney, you can put a tag on their contact that says attorney. Next thing you know, you got a tag on 20 different attorneys or doctors, or, you know, on my side of the business, it's investment banking firms and private equity firms. But just having them in my database doesn't mean anything if I can't find the particular one that's dealing with the particular issues that I have. And what enterprise software does is allow you to identify and put tags on the various different contacts and people that comes into your database. So I can have a guy in my database, a woman, a guy who would be a fraternity brother and a lawyer, but I can search them from any place, or someone who is a University of Miami alum, I can search all of them in one particular place. So from a business perspective, and that's just a little bit more, you know, social and interaction, but the fact of the matter is that's how you use enterprise software, and all documents and contracts that you're dealing with that particular individual, that is attached to their contact. And if you're a restaurant and you know that Eric's going to come in and he likes macaroni and cheese, you know, you can create macaroni and cheese.
Absolutely. I mean, to your point,
Yeah.
I've seen with this type of software, people, like I said, they have a plethora of information, and so they can really have a focus on that particular guest.
Yeah, because everything now is about data and data management. You know, we're doing business, and that's the next thing we can pivot to, is that also your business, you must create at a minimum, a regional to national to global brand of your business in terms of your relationships. And that's why, again, the database becomes important, because as you
Absolutely.
meet people, whether they're people you might have gone to college with now that lives in a foreign country or whatever the case may be, having that person there is important, having that platform, if you're a restaurant in Overtown, that let people know that you're in business and you're reaching out, so that if they travel to the community, they're like, oh yeah, we're going to go over there because we know they got good barbecue ribs or whatever.
Yeah.
But everybody,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, everybody business is a technology business. I don't give a darn if you painting brick,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one thing I want to say to our guests that are on, please, if you're on the Zoom, you can, there's a question and answer link. You could put your questions in. We're going to go to question and answer session before we end this. So please put it in. And I believe Matthew may be monitoring Facebook, and there may be some questions there as well. So,
and while you fix that, I do want to re-emphasize that point about the business software.
Absolutely. So, I've been on several, the mayor Jimenez has put together a task force. They're looking at reopening the economy, I guess you would say. And
Right.
Last week, they were talking about parks, they were talking about golf courses, and they were talking about boat ramps for people who boat and be able to take their boats out. Those folks who live on the water, who have their boats docked in the back of their house, have accessibility. There's no restrictions on them per se. So, at opening up the boat ramps again. So, and now we're talking about hotels, we're talking about restaurants, we're talking about manufacturing companies, et cetera, looking at what is going to be the new norm for operating business. Restaurants and some places of business operate initially at 50% capacity. There is right now no timeline on that. At the end of the day, the mantra and erring on safety and precaution is not to open up anything, at least from some voices in our community, until there's testing available. So what do you see in terms of moving forward and the recovery? Because obviously it's not going to be all of a sudden we're back.
Right. Well, I think that, first of all, when you look at Miami-Dade County, we got 2.7 million people. 25% of them work in the hotel tourism industry. And then we have another large percentage of people in this community that works in nonprofit. And so, that just gives you the magnitude of the impact, because that means literally we got probably close to 600, 700,000 people who are directly impacted by what's going on. But on the other hand, I'm very, very cautious about how they open, and how, because, not knowing how this thing is transmitted, and I mean, because literally they seem to don't have their hand on a whole lot, certainly, that they're putting out to the public, and this could come back. I'm fortunate. Last month I was in New York. I'm in the middle of Manhattan, March 9th through the 13th, and I'm at dinner parties and banquets, and no one had announced, and they hadn't started shutting it down. I'm sure one place I was in, I'd gone to the Red Rooster in Harlem on the Monday night, and they had some good jazz music, and I mean, it was elbow to elbow pack, right? So, given the state of New York, I probably was in an environment where it was there, but I haven't had any issues, right? I'm feeling fine, but that doesn't mean that I could not be spreading it, So I've sort of personally kind of, quarantined myself just because of knowing, where I was at, right? And that's the scary part about, not having enough of testing and opening up too soon, because if we have a reversal, it's gonna be worse in terms of just the aggravation and the problems than if we delay this thing and get our arms wrapped around a little bit more about, what's going on, so that we can survive this thing. Because one of the guy that I'm listening to most and is the president of the University of Miami. I was reading an article, and he used to be head of what would have been human health and human services for the country of Mexico. And he was the dean of Harvard's medical school or somewhere. And he worked at the WHO and et cetera. And he said he felt that we will see the peak in Miami in May, and then we'll probably start seeing the results, which would, matriculate to death in June, because we have not peaked yet. And, Miami always sort of lags New York. And with New York peaking, I would think that he's probably close to right. And so I think that we just have to be very, very cautious and careful. I've been following a lot of debates in Georgia, I think Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina, where, they're opening up nail shops and hair salons. And these are people who, you're going to be near people, And so there's a lot of distress in those areas about, should we do this or should we not do it? But I would err on not doing it and hanging out another 30 days as an example to make sure they got their arms around it. And the other part of the fact that one of the things that's going to come out of this is that we got to realize as a nation that we can't have our security at risk because all of our products are produced in foreign countries. And, that's going to mean a real serious conversation with corporate America because, back 50, 60 years ago, corporate America, they realized that the people that they were beholding to most were their clients and employees. Unfortunately, now it's shifted that the persons that they're beholding to the most are their shareholders. And shareholders want rate of return, and they want to maximize rate of return. And if that means we can get an extra 5 or 10% by producing it in China, but we're going to have to look at that because that's not a sustainable model for us going forward.
Absolutely. If there was, and not to be disrespectful to the guy who's supposed to be our leader, I'll leave it at that. The one thing he has pushed is manufacturing back here in the United States. And if there ever was a time to really focus on that, it is now.
Yeah.
There are some questions. Go ahead.
Now, I was just about to say, America is a very interesting place. When I'm traveling more in the Midwest and some of the deeper southern parts of the country, it's amazing the types of businesses. We're accustomed to, hotel, retail, but you see, people, you start to find out, like, we didn't know where our Smithfield bacon was being slaughtered at, right? Now we know because those factories and stuff are having, this Corona stuff, right? And so America's economy is so diverse with, all types of light manufacturing, heavy manufacturing companies that just make screws that are spread throughout the Tennessee, Kentucky spaces. And those companies have been majorly impacted, along with the fact that, the first residual we saw, say like in Detroit and places like that, because they had large manufacturers, auto manufacturers, but everybody took their eyes off of what was happening in some of these other places where they manufacture screws, bolts, springs, and those kinds of things that was shipped overseas as well.
Well, again, we have a few questions coming in. Okay. I'd like to start in that area on these questions. One of the first questions, once nonprofits and restaurants, cafes are allowed to open up again, what are ways we can best regain consumer confidence and their patronage?
Yeah, well, I think the best way to do is you start right now. You let them know that you're still in business. You communicate to them. If you're a restaurant, send people something about food or, whatever. You in the real estate business, we'd be sending people data on what's happening in real estate. Send people something on calories, but you can't wait. You have to start now. You got to be engaged now with your market and building that brand, because if I get an email from a restaurant, let's say from Overtown, and they're saying, hey, we're in business and blah, 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 and, we're going to open our door on, say, May 1st, just because I got that email and it's now hardwired in my head, I'm going to probably go there because I know that they're open and I don't have to drive to someplace else or make a call or even Google and see if this other place open, right? Because now they've created brand loyalty with me. So that's the thing that you need to be doing is out there. And also where you can help somebody else, somebody else in business where you can either do business with them or refer something to them. Now is the time to really work on that serious brand loyalty.
Oh, absolutely. And I say, we've been doing these, I guess I call them meetup. It's really not really organized. It's just a conversation with members every day at 4 o'clock. And are getting to know one another. They're getting to exchange information about what they do and how they can do business together. So we're just putting out simple information. A lot of people don't realize that they can call up their insurance company, their automobile insurance company. And I know that State Farm is giving 25% off, 15% off. So if any of you haven't done that, reach out to your insurance company. But again, to the point that you were just making, another thing that people can do is to inform your potential customers or your former customers that that what you're doing to ensure that they are going to be safe in your environment. Let them know what you're doing, what you're doing to keep the place clean, etc.
Exactly. And you call all your creditors, with the credit cards, they got what is called a hardship division, and just call them and say, hey, listen, I'm gonna have a little hard time. I'm gonna be a pack that I'd like to, defer 2 or 3 or 4 months worth of payments, or can I get a complimentary interest rate where, it goes from say 12% to 6%. If you don't ask, you don't know, but they, this is nothing new for them. They've seen it before. And the people who reach out and ask and communicate, because I've done it with a couple of my lenders. Well, I do it all the time because it's just good business practice. It's literally part of the business strategy. And that's like when you were saying earlier, the person said they wouldn't take advantage of it. This is part of a business strategy. Every business will do that. And so just to piggyback, I mentioned the Fountain Blue story. And so I'm reading an article about Fountain Blue. They owe about $930 million in loans and bond debt, right? And so the article just mentioned that they were reaching out to their creditors. That doesn't mean that they're in default or none of that, but they're reaching out to their creditors, right? So what's the benefit, right? I can make the payment, but if this process is in place, why make the payment, And so
you use the money to do other things.
Absolutely, sure, because we don't know how long this thing is going to last. So what they'll and now, if you remember at the top of our conversation, we talked about the federal government, right, buying the debt from banks, right? So what happens is the federal government buys $500 million worth of Fountain Blue debt. Now, instead of Fountain Blue, the total guarantee of that debt, the federal government is guaranteeing the bank that if they don't pay, we're going to pay. That's a sweetheart situation.
Absolutely.
Hey, I want my banker to do that for me. Put my debt in some sort of distress status so that someone else guarantees it if I can't make the payment.
So moving on to the next question, which enterprise software would you recommend for a small and micro business? They said they took a look at Monday.com.
Yeah, I like Zoho. And the reason that I like Zoho is that it's customizable, so that if I want to add different fields to be more specific, because most of these software, they collect information. Do they collect the information that what you want and what you need to use to make business decisions is what becomes important. So what happens is that if you choose one that allows you to customize it, let's say you're in the restaurant business and you want to be able to say, hey, I know what this person's favorite food is, you know what I mean? And you can send them an email and say, hey, listen, come by and, have collard green, right? Because that's what they like, because now certain software would not allow you to put that field in that, as an example. So like in my Zoho or my database, and this is my 3rd generation, so I have no horse in the race on either one of these, although I'm enjoying it so much, and I've done some lectures around the country on it, that we're thinking about becoming a vendor. But like in my database, what's important is that we have over 12,000 folk in our database. That doesn't mean anything if I need to find that one needle in the haystack. So because it's customizable, it's cool. The other thing I like about it is that I can assign a task or something for somebody in my office to do, and it automatically pops up on their computer or their phone, and it also send them an email so that I get it out of my head, you know, because that's what we're all concerned about. All of it's in our head, and these software allows you to take it out of your head and put it somewhere else so that you can always come back to it because you got a placeholder for it.
And the next question, actually that question came from Basil Bernard of Apricot Furniture.
Yeah.
He wants to know, does it do project management?
Yep, they got components for project management. They got social media platform. They got everything, you know. And these softwares are just like anything. They constantly updating, they constantly evolving. And what I like is that if I got an idea or thought, I shoot it to the company, and they'll say, hey, well, we'll consider this, and maybe we can make this part of what we're going to do going forward. And if I got something that I'm like I was really trying to set up fields that show that if Eric, you refer somebody to me, I can connect both of you together, because I may not remember that person's name, but I'm gonna remember that you referred that person to me because we interact with so many people. So all I gotta do is go to your name and see everybody you referred me to, right? So those things, they customize, you can customize those things. And if you have a problem, you can call them up and they'll team view on your computer and help you walk through it, you know?
That's some good stuff. So Nicole Gates asks, relationships and image are important. What industries are necessary to aggressively target to build relationships that prove profitable? For example, banking, law, etc.
Yeah, you know, I think the industry that we're heavily focused on is enterprise/platforms, you know? So that what it does is that, to give an example, I talked about what the banks are doing and how they're struggling because they go from getting 10 loan applications every 2 months to getting 50 loan applications a month. And they got a department of 5 or 6 people, right? So we look at that and say, okay, that's a problem. Suppose I can solve that problem. So we look at enterprise software that we can go in and say, hey, we can create a storage facility for you that is dynamic, and everybody in your organization can see that same document and can leave notes and make attachment, and how much you will pay me if I provide you with that, right? So whether it's the banking side, you see it, whether it's in healthcare, you know, I'm gonna give everybody a free one to go make money, right? I told my son to do this. He has a college degree. I told him to start a lawn service business, and he looked at me like, "Why I want to start a lawn service?" I said, "No, what you're gonna do is just do a software platform that allow people to schedule the person to come and cut their grass and pay you 2% and pay you a percentage of that, and they can get their check because it's done over the internet." Whereas, like, you know, how many of us have yard people that we got to write a check to them or wait till they come by, you know? And from the yard man's perspective, you know, if he can get his money that same day because nobody's at home, he's happier, right? And if it's just wired in his out, you know? And so suppose you set up a platform that did that, and then also I got somebody to come by and wash my car, and you know, it's just a platform. You know, it's like Airbnb. They're the largest hotel in the world, but they own not one hotel.
Right.
I may have to
So
steal that idea.
Matthew wanted to jump in to chime in on some of the questions. But
okay.
To jump in, Matt, Basil wanted to know what was approximately the monthly cost for the platform that you use.
Typically, you know, they charge you by user. So, and depending on the level of what you can have a stripped down version. I use an enterprise version, and I think there's a version that's even higher. But typically, you go anywhere from $30 to $90 a user on a monthly basis. And see, that's not bad at all. You know what I mean? When you consider what you having someone who constantly have to be looking for emails or filing stuff. It's like in the old days when they used to have a file clerk when I work in banking. That don't work no more. You file it as you go on your computer, right? If you have the system. If you're still dealing with hard copy, you know, you're a little bit behind the 8 ball.
Matt, you want to chime in?
Yeah, well, first of all, that idea about the lawn service, I think we might have to steal that one right there. That's a
Hey.
amazing business opportunity.
Hey, let me say,
Uh,
I got a whole bunch of them. That's what I do, right? I just sit around and think of ideas.
One thing about that, as I always say, why do you think there are 4 gas stations on one corner? Because
Absolutely.
That's true. Like we lost Eric right now, but David, I have a question. We got from Lex of Lex Pure Promotion. It says that what are the best
there's
options
enough room for
for
everybody.
small business owners when they have declined financial support from big banks in regards to PPP?
Okay, say that again.
Say, what are the best options for small business owners when they have been declined financial support from big banks?
Okay. Well, the first thing is that I don't know why they have been declined. So I will preface the conversation with that. But what you want to do is go to a smaller bank, anyhow, local banks. I have a big bank that I bank with, but then I also got accounts over at One United Bank because, I can at least get to the head of the line a lot quicker. I can establish relationship. And then I have another smaller bank, that I can have relationship with. So I think, and then there's also under this new piece, they're talking about any lender. So you can have a CDFI, I think the BAC can do loans, because they're a financial institution. So, and they have already done loans. I got to call Ron and mention that and see what he thinks. But anyhow,
So,
when they open it up, they open it up to all lenders. So what you want to do is to, look at that. Cause I know, I can't think of the organization, but they're at Biscayne and 30th Street. They're one of those CDE or CDFIs. They're one that you could probably do. But let this also be a lesson to you. Establish relationships with your bankers before you need them. You got to be able to have somebody. It's like going on a date. The last thing you need to do is to go on a date on Saturday and have to ask the guy, is he available on Friday? You want to have those relationships in advance.
Exactly. And for all those listening right now, the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce does have a microloan program that can provide that access to capital. And that's one thing we've actually been pulling together quite a few lenders small lenders that have been doing this so that more of our community can get access to capitals when they're declined from major banks. One of our other partners, part of self-employment, is another one. But that's what we're here for as a chamber. That's one of the opportunities that we actually provide to people in Miami-Dade County. You got it.
Also, there's a question. They're asking, this was Lamont Nathan, will some of the new CARES Act loans for the gig workers be forgivable loans as well?
Yeah. There's a bunch of them out there. And one of the things that you want to do is just Google it, get a lot of emails. Eric, that piece that I sent you, they can go to your website that was from the SBA Small Business Lending folk, because see, there's more to these things also than people would imagine. Because like on the piece that I sent you, Eric, it talked about the U.S. Department of Transportation, so there's a whole plethora of things out there. And if you're an entrepreneur, the good news now is with the internet, you can do the research yourself and figure it out what is out there. Then you can have a more intense conversation with the people who might be more of an expert. But you have to invest your energy and that time in it, because it's a moving, it's a moving goalpost in terms of how these things are coming out. And then you look at what Miami-Dade County is doing, and you look at what the state of Florida is doing, and what the city of Miami is doing, what the federal government is doing. There are even nonprofits, big foundations stepping it up. So, you just got to get out there and gather that information for yourself.
Absolutely. So we're really coming to that 1 hour mark. Got another question from our good brother Anthony Blackman. How can the music production company take advantage of the new norm?
Yeah, you know what? I think everybody's gonna want to have a message, right? The music industry should now start to give a message. This is intense, right? Everybody's uptight, right? So I think the music industry need to come in with some nice mellow music. You know what I mean? And
I think you hit it on the head. I think it's a great opportunity for writers right now, whether you're writing a book, whether you're writing music, interesting time.
And it's about messaging now. You know what I'm saying? You know, and the beauty of it is that you can target just who you want to target because it's about messaging. You know, I'm talking to young people who have now kind of migrated differently from hip hop because it's like, you know, I'm watching a 17-year-old guy talking about shooting people. I'm like, man, I grew up in the hood. Do you want to know what that really looks like? You ever seen somebody laying on the ground who has been, okay, so let's not, you know, let's talk about, let's be more encouraging and, you know, at least have a balance. I think the music industry can balance the message. If that's the best way to probably explain it. And I think they can take advantage of it because people are going to be looking for that.
Yeah, you know, Basil made a good comment. You know, the only way to lift your entire organization is to be on the same page. Obviously, having an enterprise system with CRM. If you don't have CRM, and you're running a business and you're engaging with people, you're very antiquated. So it's a good point.
Yep. I'll tell you the thing that I love about it, I can be driving down the street or walking down the block and think about somebody, and because of my CRM, I can just call them. And it's amazing how during this time, just reaching out to people that I might not have talked to in the last month or the last 4 or 5 years, and just check and say, hey, how you doing? How's the family? And invariably, if I make 10 calls, 4 of them lead to some type of business opportunity.
Absolutely.
Phone.
Well, you know, this has been very engaging, and I'm so. I just want to thank you, David, for, I mean, the plethora of information that you have provided today. I mean, this is something that we have to continue. The thing is, it's not like we haven't even been talking about this. We've been talking about this even before the pandemic happened.
Absolutely. And there's one other thing that I just want to say about us in South Florida, which I find amazing, and one of the things that I'm doing. You know, we have all these people in South Florida from the Caribbean, right? Why aren't we doing more business in the Caribbean? I mean, I was just talking with some people in the Bahamas. They buy 90% of their products are imported. So now when you think about this Corona thing, where is it going next? So what that tells you that there's opportunity. And the reason I say that, it's like a football team or basketball team. They play hard so they have home court advantage. So if you're from Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, Bahamas, and you got families and friends there, you need to be reaching out as another extension of whatever it is that you do, you know, because you got home court advantage, you know. And home court gives you a lot more leverage than trying to figure out, okay, how can I open up a business in Atlanta where I have nobody that I know? You know what I mean?
Exactly. You and I talk about that all the time.
Yep.
I won't go into any details, but we have that conversation about, to your point, doing business with somebody you really don't have a connection to versus, that's a very good point. And with that being said, Jeff Lozama, who is the chair of our international trade, we were actually putting together some trade missions into the Caribbean, but obviously where we are now, that has been postponed. So
well, let me tell you something. Don't postpone it, because other than having to travel down there, I'm working with 3 countries right now, and it just started in the last 2 weeks because I saw an opportunity, you know. And
well, I'll make sure, to your point, I'll make sure that I connect you and Jeff, and we could have that conversation, because we really need to take advantage of our relationship with our brothers and sisters, our family, our cousins that are in, as you said, Jamaica, the Bahamas, and Barbados, and Trinidad, et cetera. So, and the list goes on. So this has been really a great session that we've had here. I really would like to continue this. So I don't want to put you on the spot and say we do this once a week, but at least minimum once a month. I think it would be a great thing for you to bring the information that
I'm willing to, because it's so important for our people at this particular point, because I think we're in a paradigm shift that if we make the right shift, we can come out of this a lot stronger than not. And just lastly, I just want to say, because someone asked me, how do I think this is going to affect the presidential election and what that will mean? It'll mean a whole bunch of things economically, depending on who goes into the chair. But I can tell you, when I travel around the country, and that's what I miss about this thing, because it's typically once to twice a month. What I'm seeing is that you have 25 or 30% of the people who support this current president, no matter what. And then you have the other 70% of those people who may not. But those 30%, they're so passionate, they're going to get out and react. Where that other 70% tend to be passionate, but they got a whole bunch of different agenda. And that's what's going to actually, to me, dictate what the outcome of this election is that we know that there are people on both sides, but who's most passionate and going to come out. And so that's how, even with all the death and all of the downturns and the slipping in the economy, that to me is what's going to dictate the outcome of the next election.
Absolutely. And, to your point, in our community, if there ever was a time for us to come together, it is now. We need to support one another. We need to support one another's businesses. And like you said, the whole mental thing, that's a big issue that we will be confronting. People are locked up in their homes. And in particular, folks who are in condos and living in apartments and aren't able to get out the way they've used to been able to get out. So it's a lot that's going to be on top of us that we're going to have to deal with. So probably, Matt, we need to probably bring Dr. Delvino on next week and the mental aspect of what's going on. So let me just say this. One of the things, that mindset that you have to take, and sometimes I take this mindset, is looking at a prime example is Nelson Mandela. He was sequestered and locked up, but he grew mentally, spiritually, right? And so the whole part of psychoanalysis and being able, and you hear that talk about people who were in prison during the Holocaust, right? You can learn so much using your mental capacity, even though you're shut down, if you focus on that. And so don't I encourage people to be positive and pick up a book, whether it's the Bible, a book, an article, a magazine, or talk to some young person who's much younger than you and find out what's going on in their world, because you'll find out a whole bunch of new stuff that you didn't know was happening. Or come to yoga class virtually on Saturday morning.
Say that again?
I said, or come to yoga class virtually on Saturday morning.
Hey, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. That is the most fantastic thing that everybody could probably get engaged in, because it helps to bring balance back to your life and helps you to calm your mind. You know what I mean? Because everybody's mind is racing all over the place right now. And that would be that's a wonderful thing to embrace that. And it just does so much for your physical body, because part of being a good business person is that you got to be physically, mentally in tune as well. You can't just say, I'm going to be the best investment guy, financial guy, and my body's falling apart, my spiritual life is falling apart, my family life is falling apart, And so now is a really good time to look for some type of balance in your life. Change your diet. You know what I mean?
Hey, plan a garden. Plan a garden. We got time to do so much. When I say we have time, I want to apologize to those our essential workers that are out on the front line, taking care of us in the grocery stores, in the various, and obviously in the health profession, who are going to work and doing what they do every day, and to our elected officials who are out there trying to bring us back to some form of normality, which will never be the same again. But I want to thank those out there who are making sure that the rest of us are able to eat, and gas stations are still open, etc. One last question, and then I'm going to let Matthew close it out.
Okay.
It was with the tax extension. Does that also include contributions to the IRAs?
Yes, it does. Contributions to your IRAs and your pension funds were those deadlines were extended too. So that's a good thing.
All right. Yep. Well, that's I'm going to bring Matthew in, and you folks, members of the chamber, those of you who are on, who are not members, please consider becoming a member of the chamber. This is the type of information we're bringing to you even in the midst of COVID-19. So we really appreciate you joining in. Those of you who are on Facebook, those of you who are on our Zoom, this has been a very thoughtful, engaging conversation with David Wilson. And I truly appreciate it. Matthew, let's wrap it up.
Thank you, Eric, very much. And most importantly to David Wilson. I said David is one of the Black business geniuses, just genius period, in business genius period in South Florida. And it's always a value and honor to have him be able to bring us his wisdom and understanding. Some quick points that for those that may have missed some of his beginning of his speech and what he been on this discussion, I just wanted to bring and reaffirm some of those key points. Number one, most importantly, is those relationships with your banks and your creditors. Right now, as David said, it's the perfect time for you to leverage those relationships with the businesses, the banks, and call your creditors. Get those loans deferred so that you can have more cash on hand now to weather this storm as we are moving forward. And also to take advantage of the low cost credit at the moment to leverage your business during this COVID-19. David talked about the fact of the parable, the story of knocking down a tree and taking breaks to sharpen your axe. This is one of those times to sharpen the business axe and really take those breaks. Mental and emotional, spiritual, physical health is very important, and we need to take breaks within ourselves and also take breaks to really learn and sharpen our business axe. And one of the tools that David mentioned was the CRM platform, a business enterprise software in which you can start to collect and tag data from your customers and build that huge relationship database for yourself. So it's very important that you take these times to do these things, look into business intelligence and business enterprise software, and make sure you get your mind right. We do this, as our president said, on the chamber. We've been doing these weekly meetings. We plan on doing them moving forward with our partner with Jackson Health. We're hoping to do a series on how to get your business back into operational by utilizing the best public health guidelines. So look out for that coming up over the next few weeks, led by our partners at Jackson Health. And like Eric said, we have members that are psychologists and mental health professionals, and we're looking to bring them on to talk about how to address and deal with this mentally right now. So these are the type of conversations that we have. We have a daily Zoom calls that are exclusively for our members, where we bring in the latest experts, bring in people who can join in. So this is the time to get our mind right and make sure that you take the time also to join our president on Saturdays even for online yoga and Zoom to get our mind right. And I'm a personal testament because I've been practicing yoga for over 15 years, and it is the foundation of everything that I built for myself. So it's a very powerful tool for our growth. So with that said, Eric got the last words, and we're gonna wrap up and close out. Gotta unmute yourself. Get some muted.
Muted, sorry about that. Again, I think everything has been said. I just want to thank David again for providing this time and bringing this information very most definitely needed at this time, so folks guide themselves appropriately. And thank you, Matthew. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the questions that you put forth. I look forward to you all joining us in the future as we continue to do these Zoom meetings. And as I said, join me on Saturday morning, Facebook Live or Instagram, and 8 o'clock, and we'll do some yoga.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.